This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. Joining me this week, 2 more hours of the Snyder Cut, Paul Jasley.
Hello, humanoids.
And René Rodriguez.
Greetings.
I'm very excited to talk to both of you today about comic books. This is episode 278 of I Read Comic Books. Before we get started, though, I want to shout out Bill on Patreon, who sent me a message the other night asking to add links to the Discord and the Goodreads in the header of our website on mobile. So if you haven't already been there and you want to join the Discord of the Goodreads, there are now big, huge links on our website to get to that. So make sure you head over to ircbpodcast.com, click on the Goodreads link to join our Goodreads group, or click on the Discord link to come and hang out with us on Discord. We did an amazing audio hangout last night with a bunch of people, and it was such a blast. We were all over the place talking about Star Wars comics, and we avoided talking about the Snyder Cut all night based off of my personal preference, just because I know not everybody's seen it yet. But it was a really, really good time for 3 or 4 hours. We just were hanging out all night with people that jumped in and jumped out. So make sure you join that Discord. It's really, really fun. But let's get into this show. Let's talk about comic books. I have legally mandated to ask this question, so I got to do it right now. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, René.
I've been good. I've got a case of the giggles now.
Mm-hmm.
But life's been good. Comics are always good. Although I feel like I've let down the audience this week because it feels like I just didn't read that much, this past week or so.
René, I'm looking at your notes. You read more than I did.
This is just a sweeping statement, Mike. Allow me to elaborate,
Okay.
I just feel like there's a certain amount that is expected, and I just feel like I felt short. But you guys will be the judge of that, and you can let me know on Twitter or through Discord, whatever. So this week I decided to actually get back into the manga series Toriko, which I've talked about before, and it was a big series for Jump. And it has a story and art by Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro, and the story is about a gourmet hunter named Toriko. And a gourmet hunter, you ask, is it's a guy that it's a person that hunts exotic animals and plants to then make into food. And in the Toriko world, they have all kinds of outrageous things. Like they have large crocodile scorpions, or I think I brought up the corn that was miles in the sky that made a special type of popcorn. Mm-hmm. There's cola in a pyramid in Egypt or something like that. It's weird stuff. Either way, it's a really weird series, but it's also really fun. And so I read up to chapter 325 and just kind of stopped. And it's on the whiteboard in my room, just constantly staring at me. Hey, you haven't finished this. You suck. You should probably read this.
Okay.
So I finally started rereading it because all of the chapters are on the Shonen Jump app. So I started reading it. I only got through a couple chapters, as you can see. I went through 2, and it's shameful. But feeling pretty good about it. I also reread the latter 3/4 of Robot Laserbeam, which is story and art by Tadatoshi Fujimaki, who is the creator of Kuroko no Basket, or Kuroko's Basketball, if you're in the U.S., and it's a sports manga about basketball, and the anime is also really, really good, which is how I got into the series. But this is Robot Laserbeam, which is a sports manga about golf, and it is weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. It's weird, but it's also really, really good. And I read this back when it was being serialized in Shonen Jump, and I really loved it. And I was actually very, very sad when it got canceled, but also at the same time I understand, because it's really hard to care about golf in written form. I want to emphasize that I said in written form.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I find it hard to care about golf in general, but to each his own.
To each their own. But it's classic, manga and anime tropes. They're like, you don't know who that is? That's the Wizard of the Wedge, and stuff like that. And but I was rereading through the series, and I was like, I really love the way that Tadatoshi Fujimaki writes. It's a very good series. It's very small too, 62 chapters. It's not bad. And but rereading it, I was like, I'm sad again that it didn't go. that far. And then the last thing I read was a book that I picked up on Kindle called The Faraway Paladin, Volume 1, art by Matsumi Okubashi. And it is a manga, I forgot how to say this, adaptation.
Manga adaptation. Okay.
It's an adaptation, and the original work was by Kanata Yanagino, and the character's design was done by Kususaga Rin. And it's pretty interesting. It's about this orphan that is being raised by a mummy, a ghost, and a zombie type thing.
Okay.
And they're teaching him magic and like all this stuff. And so they're basically teaching him magic and how to survive, and they're taking care of him until he becomes of age to go out into the world. And they're kind of just like not really telling him why he's an orphan or whatever, but at the same time he's like, oh, I still love them, they're my family type thing. It's kind of weird, but at the same time, like I'm definitely intrigued, so I'm definitely going to pick up the next volumes.
Cool. Paul, what about you?
I've been doing all right. Mike, I know the listeners want a West Michigan weather update. It is finally spring here in Western Michigan. So getting about 60 degrees today. I got to go outside and enjoy it as soon as we're done recording here. In terms of comic books, Mike, I want to be the person to tell you first. I bought an X-Men comic recently, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh my gosh.
So, I know.
I think the most surprising part of this is I don't even think this is a book that I like recommended to you. I don't know who told you to read this book, Paul. How dare you pick up an X-Men book without consulting me first?
I know.
Okay?
I should have asked. The book in question is Demon Days X-Men #1. It's a kind of a one-shot by Peach Momoko, the artist and writer. Mm-hmm. She's doing a series of one-shots for Marvel, and this is the first one. And I remember seeing the artwork and the cover in previews a few months ago, and I'm like, well, that looks lovely. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to read that. So that's what sold me, was the artwork. And I wasn't super familiar with Peach Momoko's artwork, but I am now. Very sort of traditional Japanese style artwork. And then that's what the story is. It is a story rooted in Japanese mythology about Oni and yokai, ancient gods of the land and air and sea and all that. But it's filtered through Marvel characters. So in the story, you have an Oni, who's a giant, is attacking demonizing a town in Japan, a small village. And it's basically Red Hulk is the character, the way they draw the giant.
Oh, nice.
And then then you find out there's a giant snake, Orochi, is also tormenting the village, and it's clearly Venom. It's a big giant snake in a temple. And then the main character is Psylocke, who's a sort of a wandering samurai type character who shows up and helps the town defeat these monsters. She also has a companion with her, a wolf named Logan. So little details like that make it like kind of a fun story, if you're familiar with those characters and characters that, I know, even though I'm not well versed in the X-Men. It kind of has a DC Elseworld kind of vibe to it, where it's just filtering the characters through a different lens. And I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see the other ones that Momoko does. I think the next issue comes out next month, and it's about Mariko, which kind of makes sense. So, good stuff. So, Mike, I read an X-Men you didn't know, so I feel like I accomplished something.
This is an X-Men book. Yeah, I didn't even pick it up. I wasn't aware of it till you brought it to my attention. I can't believe that. I immediately grabbed it. As soon as you were like, I read this, I was like, I got to read this before Paul tells me about it. and of course I didn't. But still, no, it's good to hear that it was good. I'm very interested in the idea of it, because I think with all of the business that's been happening with Psylocke as a character in a lot of the X-Men books, between Elizabeth Braddock and, Betsy Braddock. I don't know how we want to call her name, Elizabeth Braddock, and Psylocke, aka Quanon. It's interesting to see like Marvel saying like, yeah, we're just going to do this kind of like alternate story about her.
Yeah. It's a character I only know by name and appearance, so I could easily jump in and enjoy this book without knowing any of that background stuff. So yeah, if you're an X-Men skeptic like me, you might want to check this one out. Again, the artwork is absolutely lovely in it, so worth a flip through. The other book I read was Wonder Woman 770. This is the first issue by the new creative team on Wonder Woman. That's writers Becky Cloonan and Michael W. Conrad. Artwork by Travis Moore. Colors by Tamara Bonvillain. And this is kind of a new status quo for Wonder Woman. This is the first issue after DC's whole future state I was going to say fiasco, and I'm still going to say fiasco, even though I enjoyed it. So it's a new status quo for the character, and it's a really interesting one. This issue opens up with Diana waking up in Asgard, of all places, and she finds out she basically died and went to Valhalla. Doesn't remember how she got there, doesn't remember how she died. She's just stuck in Asgard, fighting alongside the heroes of Norse mythology in an endless cycle of fighting, dying, waking up the next morning, and doing it all over again until Ragnarok comes. So you kind of have the story of a character who's suffering from amnesia, doesn't remember her past, yet she knows something's not right. She's trying to remember who she was before she arrived in Asgard, and there's clues that she's not supposed to be there. And she's just got to figure out what the deal is. So it's a really interesting introduction for the series. It's cool to see Diana, Wonder Woman, in a different type of mythology. And I feel like the Norse mythology, all the sword fighting, really is in Becky Cloonan's wheelhouse. She always does stories about that kind of stuff, you know. And Travis Moore's artwork is really, really nice. It's that smooth, contemporary superhero style. And he gives a lot of the Norse characters appropriately Kirby-esque costumes and designs. You know, it kind of feels like it could be the same Asgard that you see in a Kirby comic, which I kind of appreciated. So I'm on board for this series. Again, I like all of the creators involved. I haven't read a regular Wonder Woman title in a long time, so it's a good jumping on point, and it feels like a fresh sort of take on the character with a good mystery hook in it. There's also a short backup story in this issue, Young Diana, which was written by Jordi Belair with art by Paulina Gauncho and colors by Kendall Good. It's very different from the main story. It's about Diana as a young girl celebrating her birthday in Themyscira. It was fun, but it is such a strange juxtaposition from the serious tone of the main story. It's kind of strange to go from one to the other. So I'm at this point now. So I guess I'm going to start reading Wonder Woman regularly. So they got me. Way to go.
I mean, now this is what DC's whole goal is, to get you to read the Trinity books. Eventually, they're going to be $7 each. You're going to be so addicted that you can't let go.
Exactly.
Now they got you. Becky Cloonan hooked you right in.
Exactly. It's not hard to get me to read a book if you throw Becky Cloonan on it. So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for me this week, it's been all over the place. I have not had any time to read comic books because I've been playing D&D and watching the Snyder Cut. That's been all of my time this last week.
Sure.
For the most part. The other thing that I will say, I've been watching What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show, and if you haven't had a chance to sit down and watch that show, oh my goodness, guys.
So good.
Some of the funniest television I've ever seen in a very long time. But I did read some comics. I sat down and read Inkblot number 1 through 5. I know number 6 is out, but I just didn't get to it. This is Emma Kubert with Rusty Glad, just kind of co-creating this book. They're both doing art, both doing writing, which I think is really interesting. I feel like this series is, my review of it would probably say this is pretty okay, but ultimately, it's a really fun, easy read. There's nothing too overly complex. That first page on issue 1 is oh fuck, that's a lot of dialogue in this book. And then but once captions, I should say, but once you get past the first page or two, it honestly, it was just to kind of fill you in with some exposition, and then after that, everything, the book is just off to the races. We're getting a lot of world lore. It's so much fun. This idea of I guess the TLDR summary of the book is that the world of man is broken into several dimensions. One family sort of rules Mother Earth, what we call Earth, and has tamed all the great beasts of the world, like Loch Ness and the Pharaoh or the Sphinxes and all this different stuff. And there are people that know magic that are from other dimensions, and they kind of jump between them. Some of the family members have magic, some of them don't. Some of them have disappeared, traveled lands to explore. Some have decided to become conquerors in another dimension. And as the story goes on, you learn more and more about this ruling family of 7 brothers and sisters, or maybe more, through the chronicling of the one sister whose name I cannot find a link to. I think she says her name once in the book, and I just couldn't find where it was after that. But she is known as the Seer. She's the person that chronicles all of the stories of everything that her family has ever done for thousands and thousands of years. The story, though, if you've ever seen a cover to Inkblot, focuses around this cat. As our main character falls asleep in the library one night that she's working in, where she writes all of her stories, she knocks over a vial of ink and accidentally summons a cat from the void dimension. So she summons this absolutely stark black cat with bright green eyes that apparently has like magical summoning powers or has like magical reality altering powers. We can't really be sure. As the series goes on, you find out that this cat can like travel through time and summon demons and and summon nice fairies to help you in a forest. So it's kind of like the book sets itself up to be this very super serious fantasy alternate history kind of story where like things like the pyramids exist and all of our folklore is true, but then there's this cat that just keeps fucking things up, and it's very, very funny throughout the entire thing. And honestly, like as I was reading through these issues, I couldn't believe that I was pounding through 22 issues so quickly, because it is a really fun, exciting read, but overall nothing in the book really sticks out outside of the kind of wackiness of it. I feel like Kubert's art, I think I talked about number 1 when it first came out, but what Kubert's art is very old style. It very much reminds me of the rest of the Kuberts,
okay.
in a lot of ways. It's very heavy inks, a lot of very traditionally styled characters that you would see from people that study a specific form of drawing characters. I think everything, the world that Glad and Kubert are designing is really, really interesting. They know how to tell a solid story about a void cat, but it's kind of, I feel like going into this book, if you think it's going to be serious fantasy, you may be a little bit disappointed, but for everyone else, I think it's a pretty solid read. Like I think if you pick up the first trade of this, you'd be really pleased with how well it reads, because it is a very solid book. It just has like an older style to it that I don't think is bad. It's just, for a modern comic book, this looks like it came out of like, I don't know, like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Gotcha.
In terms of like style, but the writing is very, very well done, I think. So that's pretty much it. I read some other stuff that I don't really want to talk about, because honestly I didn't read a lot of good comic books this week. I think everything I picked up that I was just like ugh, overall, so I don't want to like poop on anything. But yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about comic books that are coming out this upcoming week. Comics are dropping on March 24th, 2021. What are you both excited for this week? I'm going to pitch back to you, Paul.
Well, Mike, my pick actually comes out on Tuesday the 23rd, because I picked a DC book. So I picked Batman Black and White number 4. I am a sucker, obviously, for these type of anthology books, especially when they're about Batman. They've done several different versions of the Batman Black and White series over the years, and it kind of always delivers, just short little Batman stories with usually pretty amazing artwork. The lineup for issue 4, get ready. You got a story by Chip Zdarsky and Nick Bradshaw, a story by Joshua Williamson and Riley Rossmo, a story by Becky Cloonan and Terry Dodson, and then Daniel Warren Johnson and Carl Kerschel all both do their own stories. That's a murderer's row of creators, if you're asking me. So that's why I picked that one.
Paul.
Yeah.
I have a question, Paul.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Batman Black and White, and I'm assuming that this is wrong, but I also want to say this. Is it about a Batman in a black costume and a Batman in a white costume fighting?
It's spy versus spy set in Gotham City. No.
I would read the shit out of that.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Wait, isn't that what death metal was? Or no? Am I thinking?
No.
I'm just kidding.
I forgot that was a real thing, and I was about to say, "Shut up, Mike."
So I'm making Danny in the chat very mad right now. I'm sorry.
Right, that is real. So, but because it was such a weird thing, I'm still going to say, "Shut up, Mike."
René, what about you? Oh, go ahead, Paul.
No,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, if you don't normally read Batman, these are kind of the perfect books, because, like I said, they're just short little stories you can jump in and enjoy. And again, if we have creators like that lined up for issue 4, why wouldn't you pick it up? So,
yeah. Definitely getting people in the door on those books for sure. René, what about you? What are you excited for this upcoming week?
I am excited for Hard Boiled Cop and Dolphin, Chapter 35. And actually, that drops today on the Shonen Jump app. And Hard Boiled Cop and Dolphin is the new series by Ryuhei Tamura, who is the author of Beelzebub, which was a manga that was fairly popular a while back, which I'm not going to explain what it is because I don't think that I could. Hard Boiled Cop and Dolphin. Honestly, it explains itself. I think, in the title.
I was going to say, everything I know about this series is in the title.
It's exactly what it sounds like. There's a hard-boiled cop, and his partner is a dolphin, and they live on an island, on a small island outside or in Japan, and they are basically taking on ocean crime.
Okay.
And their main opponents right now, and probably for the whole series, is this thing called the Cult of the Sea, which is like, well, it's a cult made up of mer people who are, kind of breaking away from the rest of, the underwater population and trying to basically sink the rest of the world so that the mer people basically control all of it. And they're made up mostly of top-ranking members from the underwater gangs.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what to say to this.
I'm going to be honest. It's very zany.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You couldn't tell.
What?
But I think
This is the issue. This is the issue, Renee, because every time you're on the show, you'll mention a book like this and it sounds so awesome. And then it'll be like, oh, it's on chapter 38 or 35. I'm like, well, I don't have time to catch up on that. So I just need you to show up and describe these books to me more regularly.
Well, the funny thing about these chapters is that, Paul, you can read like 20 or 30 in a sitting and it feels the same as reading like a full collected edition for some reason.
Yeah, literally a chapter is the same number of pages as an issue of an American comic. They're roughly 18 to 20 pages.
Yeah, depending on the series. Yeah,
gotcha.
So,
but really, I mean, like,
it's
30 chapters though if it doesn't feel as heavy as 30 issues of a comic somehow.
Sure. Okay.
That, and there's a lot. This series originally kind of started out as kind of like a gag manga type thing. If you couldn't tell from the Dolphin. So a lot of it is just kind of hijinks at first, and so there's a lot more pictures than big heavy info dumps, and there's a lot of action in it as well. So it does read fairly quickly. And I actually thought we were a lot farther than 35 chapters in because the story picks up really, really fast. But I would highly recommend it because it is kind of quirky, it is kind of fun, but also what is really enjoyable about it is how seriously it takes itself. Because it's like there, and everyone points out, they're like, "This is weird, right? This is weird that these things are happening, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's weird, but you just got to roll with it." And then everybody does, and it's becoming it's been a fun read since the beginning, but it is getting actually really, really cool because we're learning more about the Cult of the Sea, and there's a lot more fights and stuff like that, and things are kind of just escalating at a natural point, but at the same time it's getting real. So highly recommend Hard-Boiled Cop and Dolphin, what it is.
Nice. I mean, I'm probably eventually going to read this book as I get through every series in the Shonen Jump app. This will eventually come up on my list, I'm sure. Well, for me this week, I guess before I get into it, I want to shout out some of our Discord folks who threw out some books, namely our buddy Danny, who's here, who said that he's excited for Teen Titans Academy #1. I don't know what this is about, but you know what? Anything that has Academy in it, I will usually try. So hands down, I will probably pick this up because anything that has to do with teens in an academy, 2 words already in the title, you got me. So
perfect.
Sounds exciting. I have no attachment to Teen Titans, so you know what? I'm just going to dive head first and be like, who is this Beast Boy? Why did they call him that? And, I'll figure it out.
About Beast Boy?
Uh-oh.
I know enough. He turns into beasts and he's a boy. That's about all you need to know, I think.
Do not the disrespect coming
DC
right
fans,
now.
I know. Write your emails. Tell me how wrong I am, please. ircbpodcast@gmail.com. But for me, though, this week, my book is also coming out on Tuesday because I picked a DC book as well.
What?
This is Harley Quinn #1 by Stephanie Phillips and Riley Rossmo. The question that I'm asking is, am I actually doing this? Yeah, I'm doing this because I don't know anything about what's going on with Harley Quinn in the DC universe or what's happening in Gotham. But this team, I'm game. I don't even know what this book is about, but you got Riley Rossmo on it. Given his Red, White, and Black issue that he did in the Harley Quinn series, which everybody, come on, go read Harley Quinn, Red, White, and Black. It's amazing. Thank you, Danny, for recommending that series to me. Read that book, then check out Raleigh Rossmo's issue. And if you think that's great, you're probably going to want to pick this book up, because my feeling is that like it's just going to be more fun stuff with Harley. Something about the way that Harley Quinn is being written by some of the modern creators just really gels with the kind of humor that I want in a Gotham-based book. So
Sure.
I'm all for this book. It looks really, really exciting.
Yeah,
So that's my pick for this week.
that's interesting. Yeah, I've never had much of a connection to that character, so I've never read any of the previous series. But yeah, again, that creative team is enough to maybe pull this first issue, give it a whirl.
Yeah.
So cool.
Well, some of the, I've been talking to people about this, about like why I think Harley Quinn has really like gelled with me. And I think it's a combination of this way that DC is portraying the character in this like, fuck the Joker, I don't really need him, and
Right.
I can do things on my own and be a villain, but she still has this very much like underdog quality to her because no one takes her seriously.
Yeah.
I really like that, the way that she's written. I mean, if you watch the Birds of Prey movie, like that's the character that you're getting in a lot of these comic books, as well as the cartoon show that came out on the DC Universe app. I've overall just had a lot of fun. Like that Harley Quinn TV show that they did is probably the funniest thing I've seen in a very long time. Like as a huge comic book nerd, even tangentially knowing like half the stuff that goes on in that and all the characters that show up, it's so much fun because it feels like a Venture Bros cartoon where they actually get to use all the licensed characters that they had to only make allusions to in the Venture Bros TV show.
Gotcha.
So because if you liked Venture Bros, I think you would love the Harley Quinn show because it feels like the same animation style, the same level of like dirty jokes and stupidity and like really clever stuff all at once. And yeah, and then the way that they portray the character like Harley throughout that series really carries over to all the books that I've read with Harley Quinn over the last year or so. So I don't know, guys, I think I'm a Harley Quinn person, but like not in a weird way. Like there are those people out there who like Harley Quinn and like okay, maybe slow down there.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be like that. I just really like the character and how she's being written. It's really fun.
I could see that. I could see that because I for me, again, I've never had much connection to that character, but I liked Birds of Prey, the movie, so much that I think that this contemporary version of the character is way more appealing. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So it was really hard for me to get over the guy that played Dr. Zaz in that movie because I just kept seeing him as Reese from the Newsroom.
I could see that. I could see that.
But that movie was great. But it was still really hard. Every time he came on, I was like, yo, Reese, what you doing?
Well, before we get too deep into more Harley Quinn discussion and all the things that we found weird with, DC movies in general, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about the pride and shame of our comic collection. We'll be back in just a second. For our show this week, I said before the break that we were going to be talking about our pride and shame of comics, but psych, we're talking about NFTs. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to give it any more press. All I could say is that NFTs are bad, and if you know people that are trying to use them, that they don't care about the world or the environment, because there's a big discussion to be had about that. If you want to talk about it, come over to the Discord. I will happily have a conversation about why these things are not great for the comics industry or comic creators or pretty much anybody who makes art, because it's just a whole thing. There's a beautiful article that you can read online about what those things are. I just want to make sure that we said it on the show. We don't support NFTs. That's pretty much it. I think I speak for everybody on the show when I say that. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, let's actually talk about the thing that was the topic for this episode, which is what are the pride and shame of your comic collection? For longtime listeners, you may remember Brian, Kate, and Nick talking about this on episode 131, way back in the day. I figured let's bring this topic back. I haven't talked to René and Paul about this, and I haven't talked about what my pride and shame are. So to get things started, let's go through all of the items that are on our shame pile. Let's talk about the things that we're like, God damn it, I can't believe I own that. Paul, let's start with you. What's one of the things that you're just like, I don't know why I own this, but here it is?
Mike, I have immaculate taste in comics, so I don't have much to be ashamed of. So, no, I kid, of course. It's weird. I was trying to rack my brain and think about something, quote unquote, ashamed of. The first thing I thought of was, boy, I have a lot of random issues of Gen 13 I've rescued from dollar bins over the years, and I've never actually read. But that's purely nostalgia, which leads me to my larger point, is that the real shame I feel about my comic collection is how much of it I sold off after I graduated high school. So like early 2000s, I'd been buying comics. I didn't have a huge collection, but I had a lot of things that in retrospect, I wish I still had. So my shame is what I don't have anymore. You know what I mean?
I see.
You know, I had a lot of the really early Dark Horse Madman stuff that Mike Allred did. Those are all gone now, and those are hard to replace. You know, you can't find those in dollar bins.
For sure.
You know, I had maybe like the first 24 issues of Grant Morrison's JLA run, which was a big book for me. And like, I've gone back and read that stuff in trades, but it's like, it'd still be nice to have those original issues that I had as a young man. So I guess when you're talking about shame of my comic book collection, it's stuff like that. And of course, Gen 13 issues for some reason. So,
Well, that's quite a way to get us started.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really unfortunate. I feel like, you know, we're all eventually going to have that same pain of like, we're going to get rid of comic books in our collection, and then one day we're going to really regret it because for some reason that one weird issue of Gen 13 that we don't have anymore is gone. And boy, oh boy, it would have been nice to have that.
Yeah.
But more importantly, things like Mad Men, where you just don't understand like the value long term. It's, you know, it's unfortunate.
Again, yeah, nothing I had was super rare or valuable, but it is like, you know, I kind of wish I had the polybagged issue edition of Superman 75 I had, you know, Death of Superman, stuff like that. It's like, as just items of my nostalgia, that's what their value is. So it's kind of a shame that I don't have those anymore.
Yeah. I mean, when I say value, I mostly mean just like sentimental or just like personal value that like you think like, oh, I'm not going to just resell this because I think that kind of collection is weird. Personally, like I don't think that there's a lot of money in it. And I think it's just kind of a thing that takes advantage of the very small market that we already have. But beyond that, it is like, you know, I'd love to have this key issue because this character is important to me, you know?
Right.
Stuff like that. So I get that. René, what about you? What's one of the things that you've got on your shame list of books that you're just like, I don't know why I own this?
Well, in terms of why I own this, technically, it's only I like tried thinking about this because right after, kind of like what Paul said, although it wasn't high school, it was right after I graduated from college. Mm-hmm. I went through all my comics because I was like, we're downsizing here, you know, not going to live in as spacious an apartment as I had in college again. And so I got rid of a ton of books that I either didn't like or, you know, regretted buying or whatever. And I ended up donating them to the comic book club.
Right. Exactly what I did, man.
Yeah. It was right there. I was like, hey, you guys will appreciate free comics. And if you don't, I don't really care. But I would say since it was because I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, I found the Barnes & Noble deal, the buy 2, get 1 free manga deal that they have at Christmas time.
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah, that's a whole thing. I bought like 40 books in 1 year. It was bad.
Wow. I remember that. I remember talking about that regularly. You and Nick White at some point, I think, were buying nonstop books with Barnes & Noble deals.
I mean, my bookshelf looks like it's about to break. It's got so much stuff on it.
Same here, dude.
And like I had to buy more long boxes for all my Western comics that I had. Mm-hmm. But I would say there's really only one book that I'm really like kind of ashamed of, and it's more of the fact that like I didn't peruse it before I bought it because I couldn't. It was one of those books where it had like the wrap around it, so you couldn't like flip through the book to see what it was like. Because that's what I like to do is if I like the cover, I'll then read like the synopsis, and then I'll flip through a few pages, and I'm like, all right, if I like it, I will buy it. That's what I did with Howard the Duck and, you know, a bunch of other manga. Those ones just stick out.
Howard the Duck isn't manga.
No, it's not. But I remember that like I went into the vault and the worker that I guess Holly was like, "Are you reading Howard the Duck?" And I was like, "No, I'm not reading Howard the Duck. Fuck you." And he was like, "Just read Howard the Duck. Read a couple pages. If you don't like it, I trust that." He's like, "You can read it. I trust you. But if you don't like it, if you don't immediately want to buy it, that's fine. And I was just like, all right, this is a bold sales pitch. Let's see what's going on. And like 3 pages in, I went, damn you. And I ended up buying Howard the Duck. And, but this book, this shame book that was sealed, it's called Glepnir or something like that. And I'm not even going to explain what it is. If you've read it, it's weird.
Well, no, you have to explain it. We have to understand why it is a shame book. That's
the thing is I don't. It's so weird.
Okay.
I remember.
Okay.
I talked about a book earlier about a hard-boiled cop and a dolphin taking on a cult of mermen.
And this is stranger than that.
This is stranger than that because there's a kid who somehow gets cursed into being a giant mascot that someone can walk into and control him.
Okay, let's move on.
Exactly, and it's really weird, and it's also got like lots of weird sexual tones in it. And I just thought it sounded interesting, and then I started reading it, and I was like, I don't think I'm going to read any more of this series. It's weird. So that's the shame book of my collection.
Gotcha. Just the one shame book. Well, we'll come back. We'll come back.
I've got other shamey things, but that's the one that I'm like actually like. I'm super uncomfortable right now having to explain that to you. Like,
Okay. Well, rather than press that even harder, let's talk about. I'll talk about like one of the books that on my shame list. I tried to come up with a couple different things. One of them is when I was first getting into comics, and I've probably told this story a couple times on the show before. I got really into New X-Men, but I also heard that there was this sister series, or like one of the trio series that were coming out called Uncanny X-Men, written by one and only Chuck Austin, that everybody in the X-Men fan community hates to death. This book everyone hates. This series, this run, everyone hates from beginning to end. This is the run that has Black Tom Cassidy and the Juggernaut. They kill a fish boy. There is the Juggernaut also has sex with She-Hulk, and it's a whole thing. This is also the arc where we find out who Nightcrawler's mom is, which is Mystique, and she was with Azazel, the devil. This run was all over the place. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I was trying to collect all these books because I love the X-Men, and I, wanted to read them at the time. I didn't know any better. And so I went out and I was trying to find the final arc or final volume of this arc, right? So because the end of New X-Men and the end of Uncanny X-Men are collected in a final issue of Uncanny X-Men because it's the end of the run because Jean Grey has died, and there's this whole thing where Wolverine is basically the focal character, as he's very, very much upset, and everybody, Wolverine loves Jean Grey. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that until I read this run.
Interesting.
So the last arc of this is called Bright New Morning. Morning spelled like, when you're sad. And I tried to find a copy at local comic shops, Barnes & Noble. No one was printing it. No one had copies. Barnes & Noble kept running out. Somebody was either buying these, or Marvel was like, we can't let this kid have this last volume. So I bought a copy on eBay, and it came, and it was super trashed, right? It was just like beat up really, really badly. Didn't look like the pictures, because back in the day, I wasn't going to a local comic shop. I was either buying things from Barnes & Noble or buying it on eBay, because I didn't know how to get comics, right? Mm-hmm. And I bought that copy, and then I was like, well, this one's trash. I can barely even read it. It looks super water damaged, right? Like one corner of it was damaged like by water before it even got to me. So I went to go find another copy, found another copy, and it showed up, and the spine was completely ruined. Like it just, like all the pages came out of the book. And I was like, how am I supposed to put this on my shelf, right? Because that was my whole thing. I wanted to put it on my shelf too. And so I bought a third copy of this book at a comic convention that I went to. Finally, I had a copy that actually was in decent enough shape. The corners were really dinged and stuff like that, but I didn't care. I could open it, I could read it, and it was fine. So I own 3 copies of Uncanny X-Men Volume 6, Bright New Morning.
Okay.
I don't know why. That is my shame. Not only do I own the entire run of this very well disliked, or this very much disliked run, but also I own 3 copies of the final arc, as if like I'm some sort of obsessive with the death and like the mourning of Jean Grey. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's one of the books. I'll never get over just the year and a half I spent trying to get the final volume of this book, because I'm pretty sure that I read it. Like I got it and I read it, but I was like, I want a better copy, and so I was on the search for this book for years. And this is where my real like collector's like snobbishness came into play. So I was like, well, if I'm going to get this book, it better be in the correct format, and it better be in the best style and the best, preserved version of it that I can find. I won't buy anything with ding corners or anything. I was very rude about it to myself. Like I didn't talk to anybody about this stuff. It was just me. I had lists of like books, and I was ranking all of the values of like my various comics and stuff. And somewhere along like 2 or 3 moves later, I just realized, God damn it, there's a lot of comic books. And at this point, if any of them survive, I should just be happy.
Right. Yeah.
So, so I gave up on that. But yeah, I own 3 copies of Bright New Morning. I think at this point, I only own 2 copies because I think I threw away the damaged one, and the water damaged one got so like the pages became so fanned out and like they were illegible like on the last third of the volume that I think I threw that one away too. But I purchased, I guess, multiple copies of this, and I still own the one final one that is in decent enough shape. Yeah, I guess it's a whole thing. Are there any other shame books you guys have that you want to talk about, or any questions about this Uncanny X-Men obsession that I had?
I was going to say, are you ashamed of being an X-Men fan? Is there something to unpack there, Mike? Is that
no? I mean, here's the thing. So here's the thing. Like, let's make this into a therapy session really quick. I appreciate you asking the question, Paul. So the thing is, so like, I know that like on the show here, I talk a lot about being a big X-Men fan. I think that I'm a pretty big X-Men fan. The problem is that there are bigger X-Men fans out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm extremely intimidated by them because I love the X-Men, and I remember a lot of the X-Men stuff that I've read, and I have very fond memories of a lot of the X-Men books that I read, good or bad. It's the worst thing in the world as a comic book reader who finds things out on their own, and you go, wow, I really, really like this, only to find that the majority of the community that's involved in that thing really, really dislikes it. Right. Or you took away X, Y, and Z from the book, and the rest of the community said, like, taking away X, Y, and Z from this book is really shallow. So like the problem with the X-Men community for me is that like I feel like sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I'm like an outsider, and I feel like expressing my opinions and thoughts about the community like is going to get me blackballed. And it's gonna make me an outsider or like a weirdo in an already like niche community where there's only so many people to talk about this stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird because like there are parts of the Chuck Austin run that I still like, and it feels weird to say that to people because they go, oh, ew, yeah. Okay, so you're trash, and it's like, oh, well, fuck me, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's weird.
That's tough. Something that just came to mind. One book I maybe should be ashamed of owning or owning so many issues of. There was a series that Dave Sim, who is best known for doing Cerebus in the 90s, and has some, to put it mildly, some troubling views politically or culturally at times. We don't need to get into the specifics, but he did a book before I knew about all that. I was getting back into comics around 2008, 2009, and he was doing a series called Glamour Puss that he was self-publishing, I think. And it's basically the covers were all spoofs of fashion magazines, but then the comics themselves were a really well done, in-depth history of newspaper cartooning and classic newspaper cartoonists. Super well researched, beautifully illustrated, but given Dave Sim's expressed views on women and misogyny, the fact that he was spoofing fashion magazines doesn't quite sit well. And I still have about 12 of those issues, and it's like, boy, I just don't know how to get rid of these. Because I'm never going to read them again. Right. So I guess in terms of we're talking content, that may be something I should disappear from my collection, I guess.
Yeah, it's really weird, like you find out, and this is like the heartbreaking side of comics in some cases. It's like, we collect a lot of these things, and not to like completely get away from the topic here, but I think like we collect a lot of these things, and like I have a shitload of Warren Ellis comics, right? Like let's talk about like how many comics I've bought by this creator, because I thought that a lot of things that he did were really, really interesting, really, really smart, really well done. They didn't put people out. He went out of his way to support people, in the LGBTQ community, and he went out of his way to support what it seemed like women and creators and stuff like that. But then we find out that he's like this fucking groomer and like all this shit. And it's really tough to be like, yeah, man, the most comics I own by a single creator is this guy. And then it turns out he's like garbage. And it's weird because like at the same, the community is basically, I feel like they've said like, well, Warren Ellis probably shouldn't be making comics anymore, or shouldn't be in this position of power because he's abused it, and he's proven that he's abused it, and it turns out he's a serial abuser of this power, right? Like he's never actually, been in a spot where he's taken advantage of someone like, in a physical way, or done something that would that is, like physically harmful to someone, but he's done a lot of emotional abuse to a lot of women over the years,
right?
And how do we reconcile with that? And that's like the struggle that you have. And this comes back to a topic that we've covered over the many years of this show. Like, how do you separate the creator from the content? And it's hard in a lot of ways, because if you look back with that context and your vision of what this creator was doing, it totally changes the perspective of a lot of his books. Exactly. Transmetropolitan is a book that I absolutely love, but then when you reflect upon the idea that in this book, the way that Warren Ellis wrote it, he is Spider Jerusalem, and then he's got these two women that he is slowly but surely kind of molding into this specific thing in a way that is used in a comedic way. But then if you take it with this lens of grooming someone, it's like, oh fuck, he's just writing about grooming people in this comic book, or at least that's how it could be interpreted.
Sure.
It's really a bummer. So like, do I have to say the shame of my comic collection is all these fucking Warren Ellis comics, or do I do something else?
Right.
Because in my mind, I'm trying to just have a laugh here with some of the goofy books that I've bought, but it's definitely tough.
Yeah, I'm kind of that way with. I have a lot of Green Lantern books that had art by Ethan Van Sciver.
Sure. Yeah.
And just all of that, and just being like, but I love these Green Lantern stories. And the horrible thing was, I really like. I the first C2E2 I went to, I was really excited to get something signed by Ethan Van Sciver. I actually don't even remember if I ended up getting something signed, because I think what really put me off was that him and his wife were auctioning off a gun.
Hold on, can we walk back that a little bit?
yeah, they had a gun that they like had for sale, or they were like doing like an auction or something like that, so people could come in and place a thing. And so like he was like hardly ever at the booth, and I remember just being like, why is there a gun? They're like, we're auctioning it. And I was like,
so weird. Wow.
I was like, this was my first con I'd ever been to, and I was like 19 years old, so I was like, maybe this is a thing.
Is this normal? Yeah.
It's like the comic and entertainment expo and gun show.
Yeah,
right?
I was like, it was weird. I think that was the first year of C2E2. Actually.
Yeah, it might have been. Huh.
It was a very strange thing. But I have all these Green Lantern comics that are some of my favorite, that really got me into Green Lantern. But like they've, I don't like Ethan Van Sciver as a person.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that movement.
Yeah. And absolutely not.
Yeah. And so it's weird. It's weird though, because I have so many of those books. I would say those are the things that I'm most ashamed of.
Well, it's tough because like I think there's a difference between like you bought these books and then like years later, all this shit was found out. Like you can't put that on yourself, right? Because I think that's like the kind of the answer here. Maybe not an answer, but it is like a mental process you kind of have to go through of just like, you didn't know these things about this person when you made this purchase, when you were supporting them, when you championed them at the time. And now that you do know these things, it's important to recognize that these things happened and that's who this person is. And so therefore it is on you to basically say, well, I don't support what they do now, therefore I will no longer support them in the future. I don't know. It's a tough situation. It's tough. It seems there's kind of an easy answer, which is don't support this person anymore. Don't encourage people to support this person. But yeah.
Well, the other biggest shame in my collection is just all the Brightest Day books I have, because that story sucked.
Yeah.
See, there we go. That's what I want to talk about. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Back on topic.
I had such high hopes, and then I was like, this isn't very good, is it?
What made that book so bad for you?
It wasn't interesting.
It was,
okay.
It was all over the place. It was all over. Nothing was connected, and like just a lot of things didn't make sense. And it was just very blah, because they were like, this is the next step. They're like, remember how great Black Sight was? Yeah. Well, this is Brightest Day, and it's going to be even better. but it also isn't just the Lanterns. It's everybody in the DC universe. So we're going to make it connect in this really cool way. And then at the very end, it was just kind of like,
Well, yeah, I just remember that reading that like they're building up to a big reveal. It's going to change everything, and the big reveal is that Swamp Thing came back. And you're just kind of like, that's all you got. That's all you got for me.
Swamp Thing, Deadman, Batman. Although Batman, came back through a different way. So and it was just like I was like, wow, this is just a hot mess, isn't it? You just felt compelled to do another big thing. And you didn't follow through. And then everybody wouldn't shut up about Swamp Thing.
But how bad would it have been if the big reveal was like, and the big reveal at the end of this is Superman 2, and for some reason there's just another Superman. It's the exact same. I mean, that's kind of what the DC universe is right now, right? There's two Supermans flying around and stuff. I don't know. I don't read DC comics. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Except for Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing is that most of the time when DC pulls out a lot of wacky crap, as long as it's like interesting, I'm down for it. And that's my biggest gripe with Brightest Day, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate for this because I got a lot of hate for it at the time when it came out because everyone was like, "You're still picking up Brightest Day?" I was like, "Yeah," although I don't know why.
Right. Yeah.
And everyone was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "It's boring."
Mm-hmm.
That was my main issue with it, is that it is incredibly boring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that just speaks to the larger issue sometimes when I do see how many long boxes I have and I just start doing the calculations in my brain of how much money I've spent. There's a sense of shame I get from that. So I understand.
Yeah.
There's a sense of shame from the anger from the fact that I think I'm missing 3 issues from Brightest Day. And I'm like, it shouldn't bother me because I don't care about Brightest Day. But I'm like, but it bothers me because it's not a complete set.
Right.
And then I feel personal shame at that fact that I'm angry about that.
Well, how about this? Really quick, is there any last minute shames you want to get out there? Because I do want to talk about the books that we are proud about that we have in our collection. Let's end this on a high note. Because I have one more shame book, but Paul, what about you?
You know what? I've already shared too much. I've got nothing else.
Okay.
Nothing else to hide.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I want to talk about another bad eBay experience that I had because I, as an ignorant child who was just getting into comic books, really wanted to be the person that had like the number one issues, the person that's like, I got here in the ground floor. And so I bought all these, I was buying all these trades and stuff from Barnes & Noble and eBay. And I really was starting to get into single issues. And I started reading Ultimate Spider-Man. I was still reading it in trade. And I was like, but I really, before I go to this C2E2, because this was the convention that was nearby, I knew Brian Michael Bendis was going to be there. So I scoured the internet to try to find probably one of the hardest comics to find on the internet at the time, Ultimate Spider-Man #1.
Okay.
And so I was going to this convention thinking, I'm going to get Brian Michael Bendis to sign all of my House of M issues because I had all of those. And I wanted to get Ultimate Spider-Man #1. And I went on eBay. I found a copy of a picture that someone had took. They were like Ultimate Spider-Man #1. It looked like what they had. It was bagged and boarded. It looked in really good condition. And I bought it. And I think I spent like $25 or $30 on it. I was like, what a steal for a #1 issue of the original run of Ultimate Spider-Man. It gets here, it gets to my house. I open up the packaging very carefully just to like make sure it's the real deal. And of course, it's not the real deal.
Oh no!
It is the free comic book day edition of Ultimate Spider-Man #1, and which was basically a reprint to like celebrate chapter or issue 50 or something like that of Ultimate Spider-Man. So I was really upset about that. I was like, I can't believe I spent this much money on eBay plus shipping all the way to my house just to get this free comic book day copy that wasn't even like the full size of a comic book and stuff. It was a bummer. But I have that
better than
somewhere.
like 300.
I think I still brought it to C2E2 and got it signed just because I wanted to get as many things signed as possible. So I definitely still have it somewhere in my collection because I wouldn't have given that away. Anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about our pride. Let's talk about some of the comics.
I have
you got one more?
Shame
okay.
Thing, one more. It's like a glassing thing. I have like a couple issues that I didn't take care of when I was younger because like I got random issues from my brothers for Christmas, and they're really good stories, but they're missing the covers or they're all torn up. Sure. So that's a shame because I didn't take care of them. And then, but my main shame are all the comics that I own that I haven't read.
Yes.
All right, we're not going to talk about that because I don't want to get into that. It's an understandable shame of every comic book reader and collector. But yeah, let's talk about the books that we're really proud of. What's René, let's just go back with you. What's one of the books that you're very happy that you own, that you love this book and you want to show it off to people, maybe if you had the space and the ability to do so?
Oh, my All You Need Is Kill adaptation.
Okay.
You have an original copy of that?
I wouldn't say it's an original copy, but it's like, I guess it's like the first printing of it, because All You Need Is Kill is a light novel, and then they made a manga adaptation with the art by the guy that does Death Note and Bakuman, whose name I can't remember right now, Takeshi Obata, who is my favorite manga artist. I love his art. And so he does the art for it, and it is incredible. And the manga adaptation is very faithful to the light novel, which I also own. But so when I bought All You Need Is Kill, one, it was a lot. It was like, I say it's a lot. It was like $20 or $30. I'm just a cheapskate.
Sure.
But it was like, because I didn't like have a gift card or anything. I bought it just outright. I was like, I want this. And the art is great, and the story is great, and it was
it's a beautiful book.
I think it was right when Edge of Tomorrow came out or whatever, which is why they were like...
AKA, they ended up changing the name of that movie to Live, Die, Repeat. Did you know that?
I did, and I don't care for it. I still think the original title is so cool. All You Need Is Kill.
Yeah,
I'm like, dude,
absolutely.
that is dope.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that I'm super proud of that book, because it's excellent.
Gotcha. What about you, Paul? What's one of the books that's in your pride pile?
Again, this is a tough one, because it's not so much that I feel pride of owning it, but again, it's more of the nostalgia and connection I have to the books that I'm glad I own them. You know what I mean? So the first thing I thought of was my collection of Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol that I have. So I have the complete run of his writing Doom Patrol. And it's all stuff, and they're not in good shape. They're worn, because I've read them over and over again. I got them mostly out of dollar bins at cons and stuff, but still, it was the experience of cobbling that together. It's like, yeah, I could go buy the trade, but I want to read this book issue by issue. It's a series that means a lot to me. It's a creator that means a lot to me. So putting that collection together over the span of a year or two, I still take kind of a pride in owning that and having that at hand to read at any time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's an endeavor, especially given that, like, now I feel like there's, a little bit like more visibility into that series, thanks to our show, but also because, there was, the Gerard Way run, play TV show and stuff like that. But you were cool before it was cool, and collecting this has got to be definitely tough. I think, like, especially books that came out in the 80s, to get a full run of that's actually pretty impressive. Yeah.
And I have well, not a complete run, but I have a huge chunk of the James DeMatteis, Keith Giffen, Doom Patrol stuff, Kevin Maguire Doom Patrol, not Doom Patrol, sorry, Justice League stuff. So Justice League International, Justice League America. I have a big chunk of that stuff. Well, again, I've cobbled together over the years from dollar bins and back issue bins, and like, that's always kind of fun. That's something that when I do pull out my comic collection, I'm like, yeah, it's cool that I have all this stuff, and the other one that sprang to mind is my copy of OMAC #1 by Jack Kirby, which is probably my favorite comic book of all time, single issue. Finding that was a thrill. And then, of course, the Jack Kirby 2001 adaptation I got at a Comic-Con a few years ago. That's something kind of I have a special place on my shelf.
For sure. I mean, and that's the thing. It's one of those, like, it's a rare find. It's something that's, like, whether it's worth money or not, like, it's something that you're just, like, glad to have, right?
Yeah, and again, for me, it's the same thing with collecting records or something. Yeah, I could go on eBay and order any of this stuff, for roughly the same price, but it was being at the con, not expecting to find something that cool, and just seeing it in the bin, like, oh gosh, I have to have this now. You know what I mean? So that experience, that's what I'm nostalgic for and sentimental about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got, a couple different things. I was trying to rack my brain for stuff about, like, things that I'm really glad that I have, like, I have a full run of X Factor, like Peter David's X Factor. And again, he's one of those creators. It's kind of hard to be, like, super excited about having his comics, but at the same time, like, that run means a lot to me. It's like some of the stuff that goes through that entire 10-year span is just, it's insane to me. And I loved it at that 10 years, 5 years, maybe. Yeah, I love that run to death. And I'm happy to have all of that. Another thing that I'm very happy that I own, and I know that this is like a key issue and it's something that people seek for or look for and stuff, but I do own a copy of Uncanny X-Men 266, which is the first appearance of Gambit.
Of course.
I went to NYCC 2 years ago when he was there, when Chris Claremont was there, and I got it signed by him, which was really awesome. Yeah, but like the only reason I own a copy of that is by happenstance, right? Like,
Right.
So I ran this comic book club in college, and Gambit was not at NYCC. That Danny Dash gave me the chat. Chris Claremont was at NYCC, and I got him to sign it, and which was nice. But I own this issue by happenstance, like a friend of a friend that I worked with while I was in college that was like, hey, I've got a bunch of comics. You run the comic book club. Can I donate these comics? And I was like, sure. He's like, I don't know what I've got, but I used to collect a bunch of comics in the 90s. And I went, I used to get key issues and stuff because I was obsessed. And now I don't have any use for these anymore. I don't want them. So he donated like 2 long boxes full of comics. Wow. And there were a ton of actual like Spider-Man #1 by Todd McFarlane, that gold foil cover. He had like the edition that wasn't the one you find at every comic book shop across the country.
Yeah.
And I think I took that because like he told me to pick through things before I donated. I was like, okay. And I took that. And then when Kate Scotchless was running the group, she had to like get rid of some of the comics. And so she went through and found a bunch of them and handed them over to me. And she's like, well, there's also a copy of Uncanny X-Men 266 in like really good condition. And I was like, fuck yeah, like let me take it. So I have that because of a donation and like just a series of things. So I happen to have this copy, which is it's just really nice. Like I love Gambit, I love that character, and I never would have thought I could have gotten a copy of that book, and it just happened to fall into my lap because of just some people that I know. So I'm really happy to own that book, and the fact that I could get it signed by Chris Claremont was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that I'm just happy to have that book. And I realize it is a book, it's worth money and all that stuff, but I'll never sell it. It's something that I just like to have for myself because I just love that character.
Yeah, and again, that whole story of how you acquired it is a part of its value to you. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah, and but yeah, so I guess and I've also I'm actually really happy that I have like Japanese copies of a couple different manga that I really, really love. Like I grabbed when I was in Japan, I grabbed a copy of My Hero Academia Volume 1, Delicious in Dungeon Volume 1, Witch Hat Atelier, Bakuman, and that's really cool to just have like I have both the volume 1s of all of those in English and in Japanese, so that's really fun. And the other thing that I have is something that I found at like a book off, which is like a Japanese company kind of used goods company that like sells manga and toys and DVDs and stuff like that. It's super discount. And there's one of those in New York, and so I happened to go there one day with some people from Comixology when I was still working there, and we went downstairs to like the Japanese manga section. I was like, I don't read Japanese, so I don't know what I'm doing. So I was just browsing around, and of course I come across this huge shelf that's just all Dragon Ball volumes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was in the middle of doing a Dragon Ball Z reread, and I was like, oh my gosh, do they have the volume where Vegeta turns into Majin Vegeta? And like of all the arcs in Dragon Ball, that's probably one of my favorite because it's Vegeta at his most desperate to destroy Goku while he's also trying to help them save Earth. And he decides to make this deal with the devil to get these extra powers. And it's like one of the coolest little arcs in that whole run. So I happened to just be browsing. I didn't know which volume it was, and I just happened to just say pull one off the shelf, and I open it up to the page that is like one of my favorite moments with Vegeta as a character, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy this for $3. That is the easiest purchase I could make in my entire life.
Yeah.
So I have that sitting on my shelf, and
Nice.
It's like, yeah, Danny just posted a GIF of that exact moment in the manga from the show, but it's perfect, and I love it to death. So I'm glad to have those because that's just cool shit to have on my shelf.
Yeah.
Renee, what about you? What's something else that you've got that you're really happy that you own?
I'm really happy that I own the entire series of Bakuman because I reread it a lot.
It's a good series.
I reread it a lot. I love it. That, and like it's got a lot of little small uplifting things for when you have writer's block or whatever, and it's good. And I really like the series, and I really like Tsugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata. They're my favorite duo. So I really, and I bought that series. I think I bought because I read that series originally in college, and then I like slowly bought the issues, and I think I bought like one a month till I got all of them.
Right.
Like it was a real slow burn because like I was just like, oh, I need to budget out things. This is before I was buying a lot of comics, before I was able to. And so it was just this steady, slow burn. And then when I was able to buy the last 3 or 4, I was able to just boom, buy all at once. And I don't know, there was something like the moment of being able to be like, I would never, like, you know, growing up, I would have to just buy random issues at a comic book store or find these, you know, collections at like the grocery store or something like that, just random comics. And so just kind of being able to be like, this is the first series that I've been able to buy in its entirety.
Right. And
I now have it all. And I was personally able to do it. That was a very sort of moving experience for me.
Sure.
To be able to, like, I have this completed series.
Yeah, dude.
And I did it on my own. No gifts. You know, this was something I wanted and I got it for myself. And so it's got a special place in my heart as a series, and then also as the fact that I physically own them. So yeah, I would say that I'm proud of that in that sense.
Yeah, dude.
That's
absolutely.
Awesome.
I mean, again, and like we've said, you know, it definitely comes down to like a personal meaning. Like the pride of it is that is something, there's a story behind it. It's not just, I've got this key issue of Superman that no one else can get and it's slabbed and it's 9.6, you know, like I understand like the value that someone may have for that, but like I think every single one of these here that we're talking about, whether it's pride or shame in some cases, has a story behind it that is super meaningful to us. And I think that's, you know, that's the point of this, is to say like what is important to you, you know, and why is that thing important to you?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then, which kind of similarly was like at the last C2E2 that we actually all went to, I spent that entire time trying to finish because I bought Amazing Spider-Man in college fairly regularly. I think it was starting at like big time. It was right after the Gauntlet, so it was still pretty early in Dan Slott's run.
Yeah.
And then I stopped right after college because I was moving a lot. So I was like, and Dan Slott had just ended his Amazing Spider-Man run, so I was like, well, I'm going to spend this entire weekend getting all the issues that I'm missing. Yeah. And I did. And I spent a lot.
Of course.
Yeah.
There was one issue that like I needed it, and like the only one person had it, and it was a variant cover. It was expensive.
Oh, no.
It was so expensive, and I spent like hours being like,
but this is why we go to conventions, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that just perusing and stuff like that. That's why we save. That's why we go. I mean, like there is I don't collect as much physical like single issues as I used to, but like there is still like an inherent like mentality that you get into when you're just like deep diving through backlog like boxes at conventions that like, I don't know, you can't get with anything else. Like I don't get that same feeling just like perusing Comixology at all, or Hoopla, or wherever you're looking at comic books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess, is there any other books you guys want to bring up? Anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap up here? Because I think I've gone through everything that I've got. I don't know if you guys have any last minute like big books that you're super proud of.
I mean, in terms of big books, I mean, I have my All-Star Superman Absolute Edition. I got my Batman Year One Absolute Edition. Those are prominently featured on my shelf. And yes, and if God forbid there was ever a fire here, those might be the 2 books I grab before I get out of the house. Again, not because they're super rare, but because, I mean, those are 2 stories that are very important to me. And they were stories I deemed important enough to spend, you know, however much an Absolute Edition goes for, you know. So, so yeah, stuff like that is because of the stories themselves. They have a value.
Definitely. What about you, René?
I would say my Dragon Ball Z Volume 4, which is it's from the original English distribution, so it was before Shonen Jump did a rebranding and whatnot. So it's actually bigger than all of the new style books that I have. Like, and I have a bunch of Dragon Ball Z ones, and it does bother me that they don't look right on the shelf next to each other. So I actually had to categorize them differently. It doesn't make sense, but that was like the first manga that I ever got. My cousin gave it to me. And because he liked Dragon Ball Z, and then I was like, yeah, man, Dragon Ball Z is awesome, and we would talk about it all the time. So when he moved away, he was like, I want you to have this because I think you'll appreciate it more. And I was like, thanks, man.
Oh,
and
man, that's
so
really sweet.
It was the first manga I ever had, and it's got a special story behind it. But then it's also just a very cool because it's a very different like printing. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing that I think I really take kind of pride in, or this that I'm just always glad that I have, which is my Hikaru no Go collection, which actually outside of Dragon Ball Z and I guess Naruto, but I think Hikaru no Go was the first manga series I started collecting when I got my first job, because I had a little preview book that my friend Nicholas gave me from middle school, and it had a bunch of previews in it, and one of them was Hikaru no Go, and that was the first one that I was just like, I need to know more about this book. And I went into Barnes & Noble. I picked up the first volume. I read it from cover to cover, and then I was like, this is coming home with me, even though I've already read it. And I know I've talked about this before. Hikaru no Go is my favorite manga series. And again, also has art by the amazing Takeshi Obata. And I read Hikaru no Go more than I read Bakuman. And I reread both of those series multiple times a year. I
mean, it's wonderful stuff. Like, it's probably some of the best manga.
And it's like, so imagine, so you always know I tear through a ton of manga each year. Now just imagine on top of that, I also reread these two series about 2 or 3 times a year.
Renee's a manga machine is what we're saying. Well, before we go too deep into talking about Hikaru no Go, I think we need to wrap up. We're running out of tape here. So, this is a really fun discussion, guys. I'm glad we got to do this. It's really interesting to see what, you guys really enjoy about your collections, what you don't enjoy about your collections, or you feel a little weird about at least. And I had a lot of fun. So, thank you again for spending the time to do that. Remember, you can always follow us on Twitter. You can follow Paul at OhiPauly. You can follow Renee at Rodrigo29. And you can follow me at Mike Rappin. And you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram.
This episode first aired on Patreon, and it's possible because of our wonderful patrons. Join today for exclusive series like IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and more. You can join now at patreon.com/IRCB Podcast.
If you haven't already, please take a moment to rate and review our show. I think 5 stars would be a good place to start for that. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help spread the word about the show. And you can join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and pretty much anything else, and listen to our episodes live as we record them at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. It'd help us a lot if you tell your friends and your patrons down at the local comic shop about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. We can't thank them enough. Xander is the editor of our show. He's also just a fun person to be around and talk to. I want to say thanks to Renee and Paul for being on the episode this week. Thanks for Danny for hanging with us in the Discord chat. And thank you to everyone out there who listens and hangs out with us listening to the show. It's really awesome to just see people send us messages about things they like about the show. It really means a lot. Until next time, I want to remind everybody, comics are good, and so are you.